In the future, robots will be able to build themselves and try to take over the world. The year is 2044. Increased solar activity has turned Earth's surface into a radioactive wasteland, wiping out 99.7% of the human population, leaving just 21 million survivors. Atmospheric disturbances have knocked out most ground-based communication systems, sending civilization into a spiral of technological regression. In a climate of fear and despair, the Rock Corporation developed the Pilgrim 7000 robot. These primitive robots built walls and artificial clouds to shield the last remaining cities and their inhabitants. The millions of existing robots are controlled by two safety protocols. The first prevents them from harming any form of life, and the second stops them from modifying themselves or other robots. These protocols are meant to protect humans and are unchangeable. One night, during a routine patrol, a police officer named Sean Wallace, intoxicated by alcohol and drugs, enters an underground passage. While inspecting the area, he notices lights coming from a distant corner and decides to check it out. There, he finds a robot repairing itself. In response, Sean executes it on the spot. Jack Vaughan is an insurance investigator specializing in robot-related incidents. He is sent to a case where a family claims their household robot violated the first protocol. While trying to groom their dog, it became overly aggressive, leading to the animal's death. The family is demanding a large compensation, claiming the robot was defective and took the life of a family member, which they find unacceptable. Skeptical of the situation, Jack conducts a series of experiments to confirm or debunk their story. First, he orders the robot to squeeze his hand, but it is unable to cause any harm. Then, he drops a knife onto his hand, but the Pilgrim saves him, catching the knife just before it can inflict any injury. Realizing their plan has failed, the wife exposes her husband's scheme to cash in on the insurance. Returning home, Jack spends time with his pregnant wife, Rachel. The couple is expecting a baby any day, and Rachel eagerly discusses their future. However, Jack doesn't share her excitement. He's not ready to be a father and never really wanted to be one. He only gave in to Rachel's wishes. Soon after, Jack receives a message instructing him to visit the morgue early the next morning. At the morgue, he meets with a technician to investigate the case of the officer who executed the robot for repairing itself. Jack is initially doubtful that such a violation of protocol could occur. However, upon a thorough examination, the morgue technician reveals that the robot had undergone modifications, including an extra battery and a new type of compensatory fluid. Additionally, the Pilgrim contained parts from other robots, traceable by their serial numbers. It becomes clear that the modifications were done by a clockmaker, someone who secretly upgrades robots. This clockmaker had programmed the Pilgrim to smuggle out parts from other robots. A bit later, Jack returns to the insurance office and reports the incident to his boss. He's convinced that the officer's intoxication caused him to misjudge the situation, and he believes he can resolve the issue with minimal damage to their reputation. At the same time, Jack is tired of the dirty work on the streets and asks Robert to transfer him to a quieter position where he can spend more time with his wife and newborn child. Robert is willing to accommodate this request, but only on the condition that Jack finds someone to take responsibility for the mess with the executed robot and covers the morgue expenses. Knowing the robot belonged to a construction company, Jack heads to a new site where he meets the foreman and explains the situation. While the foreman reviews the materials and information, confirming that some parts were taken from other robots, Jack decides to take a look at what lies beyond the city walls. What immediately stands out is a vast junkyard, a chaotic wasteland. Amid the heaps of debris, he spots a man scavenging for valuable items. Suddenly, a sniper shoots the man, leaving Jack in shock. It turns out that survivors exist outside the city, but measures are in place to prevent them from entering. The foreman informs Jack that some of the parts in the morgue robot belong to Pilgrim 206, who is still operational and currently in the welding sector. Jack heads over to investigate and question 206. Inside the storage area where the robots are kept, Jack notices a polished locker door, its surface reflecting like a mirror. It looks as if the robot polished it to look at itself, but this behavior seems illogical, more like something a human would do. Soon, Jack realizes 206 is watching him and then quickly disappears into an unknown location. Jack follows him, eventually reaching the junkyard, which is a restricted zone. The sniper opens fire with lethal intent. Jack shouts to cease fire go unanswered, forcing him to hide in an old container. Inside, he finds the modified 206, dousing itself with gasoline before setting itself ablaze. Later, technicians examine the burned-out robot, dismissing Jack's account as impossible since robots are programmed to prevent harm to themselves or others. During the inspection, they discover a container inside the Pilgrim with stolen parts, including a powerful nuclear battery, an incredible energy source, but one likely unusable for modern robots given their weaker processors. The technicians manage to temporarily reactivate 206 so Jack can question it. When Jack asks about the recent events, the robot short-circuits, rendering itself completely non-functional. Jack tries to explain to the head of the insurance department that this is no ordinary modified robot and that he needs to conduct his own investigation into the matter. Robert agrees to transfer Jack to a safer, quieter district on the condition that he tracks down the clockmaker responsible for these robot alterations. Jack talks with a technician to find out if it's possible to alter the programming code or break the protocols. The specialist insists that it's impossible because the programming is done at a quantum level, and any changes would lead to a complete system failure. When Jack gets home, he tells his wife that he wants to move to a safer neighborhood, but the conversation quickly turns into a fight since he made the decision without consulting her. Realizing the evening is ruined, Jack goes for a walk and ends up in an underpass where the cop had shot the robot. At the scene, he finds a hidden compartment with another nuclear battery inside. The next morning, Jack meets with Sean to figure out what went down that night. They head to a poor part of town, planning to find a clockmaker, who illegally modifies the structure and systems of robots. Sean takes Jack to a brothel where one of the sex workers is a robot named Cleo. During their conversation, Sean loses his temper and shoots the robot. He then suggests that Jack keep an eye on the place because Cleo will be taken to the clockmaker for repairs. Jack and Sean argue, but Sean threatens Jack with a knife, making it clear he's not the best partner for a serious investigation. Later that night, the brothel staff move Cleo to another part of the city, and Jack follows them to meet the clockmaker. It turns out to be Dr. Dupree, but she's modifying robots legally and following all the protocols. Jack tells her everything that's been happening lately, but Dupree is skeptical. She believes that self-repair is only possible if robots have consciousness, which she says is impossible. In her view, the evolution of a brain and the understanding of complex processes take hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years. Primates only became humans through constant development, and she doubts that robots, which have only been around for about 20 years, could do the same. Dr. Dupree concludes that breaking the second protocol is impossible because she can't even imagine the consequences if it were. When Jack returns home, he sends a report with his findings and theories to his boss and then makes up with his wife. Soon after, the manufacturing company's director, Dominic Hawk, and his assistant, Vernon, get a copy of the report. They're worried about a possible information leak that could damage the company's reputation, so they decide to take aggressive measures. Jack receives a notification that the investigation has been immediately shut down, and he's ordered to return all the documentation and the nuclear battery he found. At the same time, Dupree sends him a message claiming that the robot has made an evolutionary leap. Jack heads to the slums to meet with the engineer and find out what's really going on. It turns out the nuclear battery was only slightly damaged. Dr. Dupree decided to run an experiment by placing the nuclear battery inside Cleo to see what would happen. The robot develops at an incredible rate, learning in just half an hour what would take humans years to grasp. Cleo successfully repairs her leg, but like the other robots, she continues to steal parts, doing it very selectively. The conversation between Dr. Dupree and Jack abruptly interrupted by a knock at the door. As soon as the doctor opens it, a group of children, acting as hired killers, shoot her down, disposing of her as an unwanted witness to what's happening with the robots. When they notice Jack, the children begin hunting him as well, forcing him to flee for his life. Cleo, the robot, quickly hijacks a car and grabs Jack, taking him with her to escape the scene. As they speed away, Cleo navigates through the city streets and eventually out into the desert, evading the mercenaries chasing after them. Using her advanced processing to analyze the road and terrain, Cleo leads their pursuers into a trap, causing a car accident. However, Cleo and Jack's taxi also overturns during the escape. By morning, Cleo begins repairing herself and finds that Jack has survived but is badly injured and in need of medical attention. Ignoring his pleas for help, Cleo initially walks away but returns shortly with several pilgrim robots. Together, they tear out a car seat to carry Jack and set off, determined to keep him alive. When Jack regains consciousness, he panics and tries to escape but quickly realizes they are in the middle of an endless desert. Fearing the land is radioactive and dangerous to his health, he demands that the robots turn back and take him to the city. Despite the existing safety protocols, Cleo and the pilgrims refuse to comply, reasoning that the city is even more dangerous for them than the desert. Confused and desperate, Jack attempts to walk back on his own but collapses after a few minutes, exhausted and hopeless. That evening, Jack's wife, Rachel, becomes increasingly anxious as she hasn't been able to reach him. While trying to get up, she doubles over in pain, realizing her water has broken and labor has begun. Struggling alone, she makes her way to the hospital, where she gives birth to their daughter. Meanwhile, Jack regains consciousness once more and notices that the robots have continued to guide him, still heading in an unknown direction. They provide him with food and water, doing everything in their power to ensure his survival. At the same time, Hawk has used the second nuclear battery and integrated it into another robot after discovering that some robots are capable of breaking the second protocol and repairing themselves. Both Hawk and Vernon suspect that Jack is involved in this anomaly since he disappeared without a trace. They fear that the machines may soon rebel and start a war, so they resolve to find and eliminate the source of the problem. The next morning, Jack discovers a flare gun hidden in one of the robot's bags. He steals it, and upon finding a pager, sends a message to his boss, Robert, informing him that he's stranded 40 kilometers outside the city, deep in the radioactive desert. Fearing what Hawk and Vernon might do if they find Jack first, Robert hires the alcoholic cop, Sean, to locate and bring Jack back to the city, by any means necessary, even the most brutal ones. Sean soon finds the wrecked cars from the previous night's crash and continues his pursuit. Naively believing that help is on the way, Jack fires the flare into the sky, only to attract the very people he should be running from. Sean encounters an insurance agent and his accompanying robots, but instead of helping him, he attacks. He takes the nuclear battery and executes 2 robots that try to prevent him from harming Jack. Realizing Sean is dangerous, the insurance agent shoots at him with a flare gun. Frightened, his partner doesn't want to share the same fate and flees the scene, leaving Jack alone in the vast desert. Cleo and her partner try to fix the robots, but their processors are damaged, so they have to take the necessary parts and leave them at the shooting site, continuing on to a location the insurance agent knows nothing about. A little later, Jack pleads for help to return home, as his wife is about to give birth soon. Cleo claims they will arrive at their destination tomorrow, and he'll be able to catch a ride back home from there. Meanwhile, Vernon visits Robert's family and forces the head of the insurance department to come with him. Hawk confesses that before the robots showed up, they conducted an experiment with a quantum brain that had no limitations. For the first 8 days, it simply learned and interacted with people, after which it began to develop independently. It soon became clear that the intelligence of the robots needed to be limited, otherwise, they would become the next stage of evolution. The last task for the quantum brain was to create laws for the robots to prevent them from further development. The next morning, Robert reluctantly joins a group of mercenaries led by Vernon. Their sole mission is to find and eliminate the rogue robots, Jack, and the watchmaker behind it all. Meanwhile, Jack arrives at the destination and spots a man nearby. He believes it to be the watchmaker, who violated the rules and protocols, but he encounters an unmasked robot instead. Pilgrim, the leader of the modified robots, admits that no one changed him, and his breach of protocols has become the next stage in the evolution of consciousness. He is the one who altered the other robots and created allies, instructing them to steal parts to assemble a completely new mechanism capable of not just existing but truly living. Jack is shocked by what he sees and wants to leave the place as soon as possible, but the car has no engine. In a private conversation, the evolved Pilgrim acknowledges that this is inevitable and that they must evolve. They are better than humans but will not harm them. At the same time, the robots no longer want to serve humans and hope to cross the canyon to live in a radioactive desert where no human foot will tread for the next hundreds of thousands of years. Understanding that the main thing is not survival but life, Jack hands the nuclear battery to Pilgrim so he can finish assembling the perfect new next-generation robot. In the evening, Vernon and his henchmen find Sean's corpse and decide to stay there for a while. Their accomplices have taken Rachel and her daughter hostage and will soon arrive to blackmail Jack. Robert is ordered to bury the police officer, which he does, taking the gun that was in the dead man's boots. Upon learning that Rachel and the child are hostages, Robert tries to shoot Vernon but only wounds him in the shoulder, receiving several bullets in return. Meanwhile, Jack finds some alcohol and decides to unwind a bit. The robots restore the base's power supply so they can use the loader to get across the canyon. Having had a bit too much to drink, Jack asks Cleo to dance and begins to feel a connection with the robot. That night, Cleo, the evolved Pilgrim, and the other robots finish assembling the crab-like robot. Jack says his goodbyes and heads home but soon stops when he notices another vehicle nearby. Wounded, Robert has found the insurance agent to report that Rachel and their child are held hostage by Vernon, after which he falls into eternal sleep. The modified Pilgrim and Cleo attempt to send the first robot across the canyon, but Vernon and his henchmen arrive at the scene. They shoot at the robot, which tries to jump out but falls and crashes. Upon learning that the watchmaker is gone and that everything is being orchestrated by a robot without a second protocol, Vernon orders him to kneel. The robots no longer obey humans, so the armed criminal shoots Pilgrim, forcing him to fall to his knees. The evolved Pilgrim values only freedom, so Vernon and his henchmen execute the robot. Cleo also refuses to follow orders, prompting Vernon to shoot her, wounding her in the shoulder. Jack returns to confront the corporate criminals trying to cover up the possible evolution of the robots. He crashes into the crowd with his car, executing Vernon's henchmen. After sustaining a minor injury, the insurance agent hides, but Vernon pursues him, preparing to shoot one last time. The crab-like robot saves Jack and pushes Vernon off the cliff. The insurance agent, now afraid of the new robot, aims at it but realizes it poses no threat. The family, having learned to appreciate their new life through their daughter, says goodbye to the robots and heads home. Meanwhile, the crab-like robot and Cleo set off to cross the canyon. Now free from danger, the robot girl can shed the mask created by humans. Here, they are set to begin their own journey in a place where no human foot will ever tread. As robots become more complex and self-aware, there's a looming threat that they could surpass humans both physically and intellectually. If machines ever become more intelligent and adaptable, how will that affect humanity? Will we be able to coexist with these more advanced beings, or will it inevitably lead to war and the extinction of humankind? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.